Hello to all my Diversity Matters subscribers. My name is Oscar Holmes IV, and I really appreciate your support. And to show you how much I appreciate your support, as a Diversity Matters subscriber, you get exclusive access to listen to Beyond the Mill, my live diversity dialogues talk show that I created and host on campus at Rutgers University-Camden. Now, because it's a live show and recorded using a different system, the audio quality isn't as consistent at times, but I promise you, the guests and content are great and you'll love the show. Plus, if you're ever in the area, please join us to be a part of our live audience so that you can enjoy, listen, learn, network, and ask our guests questions in real time. Enjoy the show. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you once again to Beyond the Mill. We are so excited to have two wonderful guests with us today to celebrate Women's History Month. So I think most of you probably aware of how Beyond the Mill usually works. Throughout the academic year, we typically have, we follow the schedule in terms of months that are typically celebrated in a college setting. So we always reserve March for Women's History Month. So the episode is always HerStory. And we always have fantastic guests to help us celebrate Women's History Month. So I'm so glad that you all are here to help us celebrate. So our guests are pretty well known on campus, but just in case you don't know them, please join me in welcoming Dr. Maria Serra, who is the director of the Student Wellness Center, and Dr. Nyeema Watson, who is our Associate Chancellor for Civic Engagement. So please join me in welcoming them here. All right, so let's get to it. Since this is Women's History Month, and we follow the theme of HerStory, can you talk about what that means to you? Like, what does Women's History Month mean to you? And if there's any HerStory moments in your own life that you want to talk about.
You want to start? Hi, I'll start. When I think about HerStory, I think about the story of the women in my life who helped get me to this point. And so, quick backstory, I'm number 9 of 11 kids. I was adopted. My parents were foster parents in Camden City, but my mom was always this woman who would just take kids in from the neighborhood, whether she is watching and babysitting, or if you needed a place to stay, she would take you in. But she was someone who was adopted because her mother left her one day sitting on a stoop and left her bags and said, "I'm sorry, I can't take care of you anymore." So my grandmother found my mother kind of walking along the street, and adopted her and took her in. And my grandmother was a woman who adopted kids and took kids in. So my life is filled with women who felt deep connections, care to children and families. And I feel like that is how I see myself and my work here, overseeing the Office of Civic Engagement. We do a lot of work in K-12 schools in Camden City, provide a lot of opportunities for young people to kind of see themselves and envision themselves in the future, but making sure that they have a pathway to success and opportunity. So when I think about HerStory, I think about the women in my family who created those pathways, who went through struggle, who made sure that if anybody needed something, they would provide that to them. And I try to live that out in my story every day.
So let me just say, one of the things I love about Beyond the Mill is I've known Nyeema since I've been here since 2013. And I swear, it's always the special gem that I learn about her that comes out when we talk. I had no idea you were adopted.
Yeah. And I tell people I don't hide it. Like it's a
like this happened in Black History Month.
Right.
There was
But when I think about it, it is a significant part of my story. I don't think about my adoption, like I was adopted as soon as I was born.
Of course. Yeah.
But all of these things, when I think about it in retrospect, and I think about narrative, yada, 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 it does make up who I am. But yeah.
But it's just so important because, like I'm going through the adoption process for my own child right now.
Yay. Like here, who need that support right now. Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome.
All right. For me, again, it's family. I come from, started with my grandmother. She lived in a tiny little village in Portugal. with her father and mother, and her father was incredibly abusive to her mother to the point where she eventually ran away to the city and took the children with her. So my grandmother went to work as a domestic when she was 8 years old. That same woman eventually ended up having her own business, building herself and her family a very nice home in another country, because then she had to move to Angola in order to run away from the government. So that set the tone for the women in my family, which is pretty much take what you get, and if you're given lemons, make lemonade, lemon pie, lemon cake, lemon chicken, lemon cookies, and don't stop there yet, but I'm sure you can come up with something else. Use what you got to progress. We all come from, my country, we were ruled by a dictatorship. I come from Angola, by the way. It was a dictatorship, it was a colonialist government. And as a result, you're not allowed to have a voice, you're not allowed to have an opinion, other than what the government put in front of you. My grandmother had a 4th grade education. My mother, because they lived literally in the jungle and there were no schools around, my mother never went to school. My mother can read, my mother can write, my mother helped us with our homework. My mother can go to the opera and know what we're talking about. She loves museums. She instilled in everybody a love of learning, and that came from my grandmother. A love of learning, a love of knowing, and a love of challenging things in a way where you're still safe. Because again, if you challenge them openly, you'd probably be dead sooner or later, because it was a dictatorship. So they learned how to change things, how to become women who are not supposed to be independent. All the women in my family are incredibly independent. They were not allowed to, even professions, you can be a vet, for example. They never went to school because it wasn't available. So what did they do? They made, they learned to sew. There was typical women tasks, and they made incredible professions out of that. I can show you pictures of beautiful wedding gowns designed and done by my mother, for example. Just because that's how they had to make extra money. That's how they felt like they were contributing in some way, shape, or form to other people, and still remaining independent. So that's where sort of my role models come from, way back.
So, Maria, whom or where do you attribute that sort of independence? Was it similar, say, with your neighbors in Angola, or was this your mother and your family, they were just really different compared to most of the women at that time?
There were some women that were pushing that, but they were different. They were clearly different. My grandmother, my grandparents, my grandmother, they were rebels in their own way. My grandparents were vegetarians when nobody knew what a vegetarian was. My grandmother, again, we lived under dictatorship. My grandparents had a collection of blacklisted books, and if you were caught with those, you'd go to jail or you'd possibly be killed. Still, they found ways of having them. So they always found a way of knowing more, and I learned a lot from them. One is, if there is a major conflict, don't believe any side. And that's in the war or anything like, don't believe what the official sources tell you, because they only tell you what they want you to know. And that came from living under a dictatorship. And once my grandparents moved to Portugal, there was a revolution, then now they could be free and do whatever they want. They promptly became socialists, and they were marching down the street with the socialist party. So
we were going to get to this later, but since you segued perfectly into it, clearly, you know, politics is huge for an election year, presidential election year. So many of us probably have recently seen the announcement that, you know, Elizabeth Warren suspended her presidential campaign. So can you talk about what it means for her suspension of her campaign, not only her, but other women who ran? You can even go back to Hillary Clinton if you want. But just from your perspective of what it would mean to have a woman as president, and just all of the emotions that may come from seeing various types of women who tried to obtain this office, but regardless have failed to date. So, Thoughts?
Yeah, I was Twitter messaging Kelly Dittmer yesterday. So she's a faculty member here who's amazing. And so if you're interested in politics and certainly the intersection of women, political leadership and gender, you should follow her on Twitter. And it struck me that I've been a Joe Biden supporter. I think he's a solid candidate, but I really wanted Elizabeth Warren. And I thought she was just smart. Like, she studies, she reads, she researches. I appreciated that she had a plan for everything and everybody, and she knew it, and she could talk about it at any time. And I'm a political junkie, and so I'm watching MSNBC all night long, and I'm watching the results come in. And then it hit me, the pundits were talking about how Joe Biden had not even set foot in some of the states where he was winning. He's run no ads. He hadn't set foot in these states. And I said, how is it that this man, this white man, not doing anything, can win in the last minute? And Elizabeth Warren was everywhere. Like, she was in her home state. She would talk to anybody, anywhere. And that just like crystallized for me yesterday that and then taking it back to Hillary Clinton, if white women can't do it, there was no way Kamala Harris was going to get any further. And so I'm still processing my feelings about that. And as I said, I'm a Biden supporter, but I was like, if this man didn't even have to show up, and we as a society are more comfortable with white male leaders just because, and not give this woman the opportunity, where are we at? And the same thing with Hillary Clinton. Like, I always felt that she was too much for everybody. I remember when she and Bill Clinton were in the White House and she was talking about like health care for children. And I was like, yes, she should have a job. She's the first lady. She should be doing something. And people were like, no, like the first lady is the first lady. Yes, like she should be in there creating policy. And they were like, no, that's not how it works. And so I remembered even then that there was a certain lane that you had to stay in, and they were not ready for Hillary. They're not ready for Elizabeth. I don't know if we'll ever be ready. Like Barack Obama, yes, first black male president. Like, that's even more comforting, this idea of patriarchy than a woman. So I'm still processing it, and I just saw, I was like, oh, now I'm worried who she's going to throw her support behind. That's a different conversation, but yeah.
What she said. I think there are two levels for me. One is when you ask about the political climate. The political climate overall for me under this administration has been very scary and very anxiety producing, especially as in some of the policies regarding women, policies regarding children, policies regarding women's health care. So that's been scary. As for what happened with Elizabeth Warren, it didn't surprise me. I expected it for exactly the same reasons. I don't think that this country is ready. Now, I'm not a political junkie. I don't have a complete grasp. And being an immigrant, sometimes I still miss stuff. I don't have a complete grasp on why this country is not ready, but we are not ready. We look at Pakistan had a woman leader. We look at India had a woman leader. We look at all these other countries, but we somehow are still not ready. I think we're finally to the point where more women are getting to the boards of large organizations. But I think it's a jump for women to get from that to the presidency. And I hope I'm being really negative, but I would expect that the first step would be for a woman to be vice president before this country even begins to feel ready having a woman president. And that, frankly, makes me very sad. But.
Yeah. So we always open it up to the audience for questions. We do it typically a little bit later, but I really want to open it up now to just hear from some of you if you have thoughts and questions, or you just have a reaction to something, because this is an important moment, right, in our history. So any reactions from the audience right now of the moment that we're living in, or your just own feelings about the situation?
I had a good level reaction to Nyeema's statement, Dr. Fox's statement.
We do first names.
Yeah, that's right.
Regarding the levels of, I guess, glass ceiling, so to speak, that women have to bump against in order to get to certain spaces of perceived power or influence. When we kind of scale back a little bit, thinking about university structures, right? How often do we see women of color at the helms of larger university structures? And that's a layered statement to what types of, because both of you women are in places of power, what types of power dynamics have you had to traverse in your process of getting to the positions that you're in, with some of those layers kind of in your thought process, as well as being subversive connections to you getting to those spaces that you're in?
It's a good question. Some of the stories maybe of traversing that terrain.
Yeah, so I made it to this position at the university because a woman saw in me what I didn't see in myself, and saw that I had leadership ability, and knew that I had the desire to do more, but absolutely created an opportunity for me to do so. And set me on this path and opened doors and gave me opportunities to work on projects and put me in spaces where I was like, I am not ready for this. And she was like, no, but you're going to sit there and you're going to learn and you're going to listen. And the more I keep doing this, the more you're going to start seeing yourself in these positions. And but in that is a lot of stuff. In that were my own issues are of being Black, being a woman, being from Camden, being poor, like those things kind of still stick with you. So at any given moment when I'm faced with a challenging situation, I'm like, it's because I'm Black. It's because I'm a woman. I still think of myself as poor. I was raised very poorly, even though I am not. I am solidly middle class, but like that's still in my head. And so as I still kind of navigate through life, I do keep a very tight group of women around me to help me bounce this stuff off of. And so I can be like, am I crazy? Did that just happen? And be like, yes, it did. And this is how you navigate it. This is how I've navigated. And I keep in this circle women who I aspire to be, women who I feel like are at my level now, and women who I feel like I'm doing that, which was done for me, and creating spaces here. But every time I bump up against a challenge, whether it's, I remember a meeting Chancellor Haddon and I had, one of our very first meetings with a board she joined in Philadelphia. And we were the only two women in the room, women of color in the room, who were allowed to sit at the table because the staff set them back. And Chancellor Haddon, great points, she's out there, and like the men weren't listening. And then towards the end, like she banged her hand, and they were like, oh, we're sorry. And I was like, okay, this is how you do this. Like she's sitting there and I'm knowing she's saying the right things. Or some man would say, and they were like, oh yes, like that's a great idea. And that stuff is repeated. And afterwards I'm like, maybe and she was like, this is what we have to do. Like I have to be at that table. I told them no, she's not sitting in the back with everybody else. Like she's going to sit at this table with me. But that's repeated. And then you ask, is it because I'm a woman? Is it because I'm Black? And then you have to kind of quickly realize how to navigate all of that terrain to kind of stay focused, say what you have to say, and make it to the other side.
For me, there's a number of issues. One is, like you, I was raised very poor. I have an accent. I come from another country. Sometimes, like I said, I still miss some things in terms of the whole American thing. Even though I've been here for 40-something years, sometimes I'm going, what? And the whole being a woman. Where I grew up, women were teachers, sometimes physicians and nurses. But I became a teacher right after, as soon as I was old enough to be able to teach. So the whole idea of being in a position of any sort of authority or power never crossed my mind, ever. There were some people in my life that were incredibly influential, Two of them were men in my graduate program in clinical psychology who not just encouraged me, but one time I was passing by their office and they were actually talking about me. Mm-hmm. And I overheard something that made me run away crying, not because they were talking bad about me, but because of what they were saying about me, which was so different from how I perceived myself. Mm-hmm. I thought of myself as not incompetent, but having difficulty being competent or coming across as competent because I had an accent, because I could miss things socially. And they were talking about me in the most glowing terms about how much potential they saw with where they thought I was going to go. And I was stunned. Mm. I had to go cry to my friends about it, my girlfriends, because I had no idea what to do with it. And the other one was the first boss that I had here, was a nurse practitioner, a woman who, again, just saw in me things that I wasn't ready to see. And after that, I kind of very slowly got to the point where when I was first approached about even applying for this job as director of the wellness center, I'm like, no, I can't do that. That's not my kind of thing. And other people kept saying, including coworkers, oh no, we need you there. Go apply, go apply, go for it. Because there was a huge discrepancy. I wasn't raised to be a director of anything. I was raised to be a housewife, a mother, to have a side job like teaching or, sewing or being a dressmaker where I could still remain somewhat independent. But I wasn't raised to do this. So that has always been challenging. And when confronted with sexism, when confronted with, you say something and nobody pays attention, and then a guy says something and everybody goes, oh, great point. I've learned to be somewhat obnoxious about it now, to the point where I said, didn't I just say that? Even at staff meetings, I'll do that. I said, wait, didn't I just say that? And I've learned to do that with other women too. If someone says something, I've learned to say, wait, she just said that. But sometimes I still feel like, is this the right place? And people have to remind me it is the right place. I have to remind myself. And I have to constantly worry about, as a woman, I wasn't supposed to step on any toes. That was not my job. I was not supposed to be seen, not heard. So it's taken time to figure out that I can be heard and I should be heard, and to facilitate that in other women, and to teach other women, including the younger women, how to assert themselves, how not to put up with it, how to protect themselves. And I think that's part of my job, even as a psychologist, that I look forward to.
So we talked a little bit about what other women can do and mentoring and sponsoring young women. Could we talk about what men particularly can do to hopefully reduce the types of self-monitoring, the types of microaggressions and gaslighting that's experienced? Because it's not just, I don't think women should just be feminists. I think everyone should be feminists, right? So what is it that men can do? What would be your suggestions? And I think even more so than women, what women should do, like what men should do to help along these lines.
I think become better informed about all of this. And so you had a question down here about the Me Too movement, and I thought about it from the perspective of hopefully now men are seeing, understanding, recognizing that there are really big things that go on. Like women get raped, that's about a power dynamic, and they're getting raped by their bosses. They're getting, aggressively sexually harassed. But that also, like these little things happen every day that also need to be attended to. And so yesterday a colleague said, I saw you walking down the street and I beeped the horn at you, but you didn't acknowledge. Because my mother taught me never to acknowledge somebody who beeps the horn at you, because 9 times out of 10 it was a man who was trying to catcall me. And so she was like, look forward. If they say your name, maybe like Sasha. So anybody if you beep the horn, I will not acknowledge. That's just, it's ingrained in me. But for men to realize catcalling, you don't have to touch me to say hello. Like I sat on a board, I was a young board member in the Kansas City School Board, and this guy would always put his hand on my shoulder or on my back, and I said, you don't have to touch me to say hello. He was like, oh, you're one of those. I don't know what those is, but Yes, and so I hope that men are really taking seriously that it's not just these big things that happen, but these daily small things of, whether it's, you can compliment me like, oh, like that, that's a nice color on you, but like, oh, look at the curve of that dress. Like that just come out of the mouth that may seem kind of small or a cute gesture, but it's not. And then women, because when you hear this over and over and over and over, even from a guy who's a friend, you're just like, oh, like you're gonna explode, or you learn how to just suck it in and keep it, and that's not right. And so I hope that for men that you're listening, that you're paying attention, that it's not just these big things, but like talking to your friends, talking to your sisters. What has a guy done that you haven't liked? Or letting them know that you will support them if they have these horrendous things happen or these small things happen, that when you're in a space, you can be like, dude, that's not cool. Let's not say that. And saying it when they're not there and saying it when they're there. But talk to the women in your lives and simply just ask them, what have they experienced? And then being there for them when they share what they've experienced and being for them.
I would say that if we can get all men to just learn something very basic, that women are human beings just like them. We're all in the same boat. We all share the same earth. We all have the same pains. We all share a lot. And if we can just get to that point of fairness, equality, understanding that this is not a less than person just because of their gender, we've gone a long way. Because what that will also do is help you raise sons and daughters that are going to perpetuate that are going to carry that forward. We can't go back and fix the past. It's done. What we can do is go forward and look at how can we impact on what's coming. And like for me, for example, if I'm dealing with someone with severe trauma, abuse, and so on, if I can get that person to a point where that's no longer an issue and they're going to raise their children in a completely different way and stop that cycle of trauma and the violence, I've just, in my opinion, did a great service to humankind. It may not seem like a lot, but when you multiply that by hundreds and thousands of people, that's going to have a huge impact on the future. And to me, again, and as a feminist, I think it's about fairness. It's about we human beings. How about if we treat each other that way instead of assuming that you can make those comments or you can do the catcalling just because this person is somehow less than, because that's what it implies. And no one should be less than.
So I have a question to follow up on that, but I again want to prime people in the audience just to make sure I get your questions in as well. So anyone have any questions? Manny?
So how do you feel about the concept of being a mother or potentially having a child, wounding your rights and the glass ceiling? For example, many of the chances of a woman who's in the top 500 CEO or leader, the chances of having a family or having a child go absolutely super down compared to the population of other females.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just say something about how we're not ready for a woman president?
Mm.
Yes.
So there's something about this society, because if you look into a lot of countries in Europe, that is not nearly as much of an issue. But also, they tend to have huge maternity leave. So women are taking parents, because in a lot of countries in Europe, fathers have mandatory paternity leave, okay, which we can't even begin to think about in here, because they value children and they value raising children. In this country, we don't value raising children. You look at what a daycare worker makes, it's minimum wage, because that's what we think they deserve, frankly. It's like it's not, that work is not, you're just taking care of kids. So I don't believe that motherhood should, and I have 2 daughters, by the way, that motherhood should somehow impact on your ability to accomplish, on your ability to get to positions of power. But I do think that mothers do have to struggle harder, because we don't have good maternity leave policies. We don't have good paternity leave policies, which leaves women without the support of a partner. And we don't have a lot of, in most places, we don't have a lot of support for parents in the workplace, which again doesn't help.
I'm a relatively new mom, and I waited longer than average time. I was called a geriatric patient, even though I didn't feel that way. And purposefully did that because I thought I could not get access to what I wanted by having a child. Not even fully contemplating what society would put on me, but the drive and motivation I had in myself. Like, I only have so much energy, like I have to kind of decide what I'm going to put it into. And I have a daughter, and I am raising her to be as fierce and independent as I can. She's 13 months and she's very fierce and independent. So that some of the self-talk, I talk myself out of things, I don't talk into her, and trying to create a space in a world where she will not have to make this decision. And if she decides to have a child or not, that's her decision. If she decides to have a child early or late, that's her decision, and she'll still be able to kind of access opportunity, but more so having her understand that she can do anything, that she can be anything, that she will probably still have to kind of knock down and beat down doors, and I need to prepare her for that and a whole host of other things. I was on a panel a few years back, and it was like, women, can you really have it all? And all the panelists were like, yes, but you're not going to have everything at the same level at the same time. Like, you could be a mother, you could be a friend, you could be a professional, but your friendships are going to have to decline at some point if you need to be this professional and this mom, or motherhood's going to take this priority. It's not saying that you can't be a professional. So yes, you can have all of these things, but it's going to have to kind of create this balance. Like, you're going to have to find within yourself, and then hopefully find spaces that are supportive of that.
So, anyone else right now? Tiffany. I do want to respond to the parenthood comment though too, but I want to give you all opportunities to ask your questions. Yeah.
So I believe bringing attention to women not being in higher power is really important. I hope I'm really negative or I sound negative in my perspective that it is difficult for women, for us to get, like Elizabeth Warren, women that are smart, they have the credentials to get up there. You look back on history, and it was created by our founding fathers. It was created by George Washington and his troops. So if it's a country that was started by that, it's just so hard to change it. And I hope I'm negative. I guess I don't know yet how to get in power, and I still, you deal with the catcalling, or you deal with the educating men, because men still will text you and expect things, and so that's one issue. And then working, but the higher power, I hope I'm being negative. I just think that it is difficult for women to break the glass ceiling when it comes to higher power, being in higher power, in positions of higher power.
Yeah.
I think it's coming. Like, I think I think it's coming. I think there are significantly more progressive movements that have started in the past few years that are laser-like focused on women's issues and getting women into these positions of authority. Again, if you're interested, go speak to Kelly Dittmer. Like, the university has centers and resources because they want women to be leaders. There are whole organizations nationally who want young women to kind of train them up, to get them elected, to help them understand how to navigate. Just had lunch with a woman last week who works specifically with helping women, fundraise for local elections and bringing other women into the fold, because they're like, if women aren't supporting women, like, we're not going to get to this place. So I feel like we are in, as a society, good and bad, in like the midst of a significant transformation right now, where women have, kind of really stepped up and said, like, we're not going to take this anymore. My fear is that this kind of coalition will kind of bifurcate somehow along racial lines, and that all women won't be brought into it. because there are very particular, specific, unique things that women of color then have to deal with as they're trying to access these positions of leadership. So there's some baseline things that all women need to be supportive of and helping each other, but that women of color face these extra things. That we need white women at the table kind of talking about our issues too. I see that it's happening some. It needs to continue to happen. But I feel like we're in a moment of change. I think Elizabeth Warren and Hillary Clinton, like I don't think she gets the credit that she deserves for like, I am just gonna absolutely plow through this. I don't care if you like me or not. Like I think for her and Elizabeth Warren, again, and Amy Klobuchar, like she wasn't my candidate, but for her being up there, for Kamala Harris, that these women now are coming out and saying like, I can do this, I see myself in this place, and that we have to continue to support them, that men have to support them, and say that I think this woman is a valid candidate. I was like, who were Elizabeth Warren's people out there kind of on my Twitter feed or on the news? Who were her champions? So I think we can get there. So use that kind of energy to like push you forward to say, like, you know, I want to make sure that happens.
So, if I may ask you, just from a show of hands, particularly the students here, how many of you think a kid would impact your career? Well, let me reframe it. Impact. What I mean by impact, because clearly a kid would impact anybody's career, right? How many you think of that kid though would negatively like slow down your career like a lot? You feel? Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah.
And so, for the people who didn't vote, why didn't you raise your hand at all? Do you feel on the flip side that you feel like a child wouldn't have any adverse impact at all on your career? Okay.
I honestly feel like just in general, I have a very supportive family. My sister is currently pregnant with her first child, and my mom always talks about how she's working as a babysitter for them, whatever. So I just feel like when I get to the point when I have kids, I have my mom and obviously my wife's parents as well. But I know my mom will always be there, and I don't feel like it would stall my career that much because I would be able to call her at any moment. She would easily do it.
Yeah. Other people? Yeah.
I had a child freshman year, and he hasn't slowed me down at all. I'm still able to go to school, and do I have to do, because I know there's other people that help me take care of him, and he goes to daycare, and he's perfectly fine. So just the fact that you know that you have options really helps. Like, you don't have to depend on other people. I don't, like, it's easier for me to put him in daycare and then work here and at home to help him be better. When he goes off to school. That's great. That's great.
Yeah, I remember reading your reflection. Yeah. So, I am a relatively new parent as well. And intellectually, like I always knew, a kid can have a negative impact on your career, but it wasn't until I had a child that I really lived it. And I don't have my husband and I, we don't have the gender dynamic thing because, we don't have the gender norms of a woman have to stay there or not, right? So we don't have to deal with that dynamic. But wow, our son, like literally, I see all the opportunities of events that I need to like turn down requests from, times where I have to leave work for things to pick him up from daycare because he's sick, or the daycare is closed on this holiday or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So for me, and I am speaking from a lot of privilege, like I'm really well off to socioeconomic status, so we have nannies now and things like that. We don't have any family in the area, so family is definitely a huge help because we don't have any family in this area. But I really see how big like a kid can really throw out your career. You can be on a trajectory. It's not impossible to still make it and keep going up, but wow, it's a hard road with the kid.
And even for yourself, and so that's why I said it's not the societal
the guilt
thing.
I felt
like
too.
I canceled something for next week because I knew at the end of the month I'm taking a 5-day trip to Seattle. So I have to I feel like I need to balance out. And I have family. God knows, like, if I did not have my family, like, I literally wouldn't be sitting here today because she's not at school today because she's sick. And so it's like, how many days in a week can I take off? Like, those are the things. But I do live in a very kind of traditionally gendered household where her father's like, oh, like, she's home again? I'm like, you didn't see the text from the daycare? No. And we've made kind of these conscious choices that some would say, well, you really aren't a feminist.
Right.
Because I'm like, okay, like, this is what I'm going to have to adjust in my schedule. And I have to tell him what he needs to adjust in his schedule. And he will. But he doesn't think about adjusting his schedule first. The school doesn't think about calling him first. The school's like, oh, I'm going to call mom. And she's going to sort it out. But you do put a lot of self-guilt on you to be like, I got to pick and choose. Like, yoga's for me, but I haven't been home 3 nights a week because I have these work commitments. Like, how am I going to balance that out? And so it does change, and I think it changes over your lifespan as you kind of navigate your professional career, your friendships, again, like all of these balance points. But and the sleep deprivation. Like, yes, it gets real quick.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, just to, I have 2 that they're now grown. They are very assertive, feminist, independent women, as you probably expect. But did it get rough at times? Absolutely. But one thing that I say parenting does to you is help you put things in perspective. It helps you learn to really prioritize, to figure out what's truly important. And sometimes that's a difficult decision. Is it truly important for me to be at work today? Or is it truly important for me to be at home today? Not easy decisions, but I think it really helped a lot. The other thing is that if you have a really bad day at work, unless you have a great puppy, nothing makes up for a little 2 arms around your neck saying, Mommy, I love you, or Mommy, I miss you. Nothing makes up for that. So there's some benefits. Okay? It kind of refuels it in some ways emotionally.
Yeah.
I would like to add to the narrative of being a parent and a caregiver, right? Which is kind of sort of reverse parenting, a perspective that often gets missed as well in terms of, some of you guys may have unique situations, but as you get older, your parents will get older too, and the dynamic as to how you may have to care for them may change, adding to if you have children and you're a caregiver. And the choices that you'll have to make in terms of your career and how you navigate your career and caring for individuals that are younger and older, kind of in this vulnerable framework and where you fit in that. And what all of that looks like can be completely complicated.
Yeah.
And we talk about systems of support, right? So when Maria talked about how daycare workers, get so little, that's the puzzling thing about me, because I look at my daycare bill every month and where's all this money going? I feel like,
And they making minimum wage.
What am I giving up?
and I love our
And
daycare
then with the
system.
additional support, like these women primarily have our children.
Right.
Like, they are with them, mine from 7:30 until 5.
Right.
I try to give them everything extra I can give them, but then yes, we are established. We do have these other caretakers who have to come in because they're not there 24/7. But then yes, I'm like, absolutely, they need to be paid more. Absolutely, this.
I'm like, the owners must be swimming in money because
this is the beginning of everything. So
daycare. That's what.
And I think your point was well taken, that as a society here in the U.S., we don't value childhood, and that's an indicator of it, or what is considered women's work, and that caregiver role tends to fall on both sides of the woman traditionally, to taking care of the kids, taking care of your parents, and then put your career in the middle of that, your education, whatever else you wanted to have for yourself, and it's gonna, just greatly become complicated.
Yeah, so I think Tiffany was talking about being pessimistic earlier, but like you mentioned, there is some optimism because there are more and more role models out there, people doing it. And you can have it all. It's like you're saying, it's just your balance and act of how you do it. And obviously some privileges are tied to having it all as well. That I'm hopeful for all of you in here that you will be able to do that. Others? Yes.
I just wanted to touch upon the child care aspect of like working, because that was my first job working in a daycare center. And then I just progressed from like being a teacher's assistant to like having my own preschool class. And it was like very phenomenal, like to see like these children literally grow before your eyes. I mean, you be a part of the aspect of them basically growing, like being in their lives and stuff like that. So that was a constant battle, like being in their child care system, like, you know, you do so much with them, you invest so much in them, and then like your paycheck is literally that investment that they're giving back to you. But it was really incredible to see the families like pay attention to what you're investing in your children, and then be that back end and that support of like, we see that you may not be getting paid as much as this, so let's help in, you know, in any way, shape, or form or possible and stuff like that. So that was very interesting when Dr. Serra was basically talking about other countries, how they value the aspect of family, the aspect of mothering, you know, so much, super greater than sadly they do in the U.S., which is crazy because, like you guys said, how much you pay for daycare, those bills, and it's great because the institution I was at was like weekly. So these parents were like coming in weekly, like making investments in their children. You'd be like, sheesh, a lot of money. And then you look at yourself like, sheesh, I'm not getting it.
Right. So just to be transparent, I mean, to make it concrete, for me, like our son is in Goddard, and we pay $1,300 a month.
Yeah.
You know, that's a lot of money, right? Yeah. And I look at how many kids are in that school, and look at like, that's it.
And it's not
So for people who are like, if you're thinking about starting your family, you know, when you graduate and things like that, or if you already have one with kids, like that's a big number. And then you calculate student loan payments that you may have to make on top of that, and then your mortgage and your car payments. And it's a different world for this generation, right? Coming up.
You don't get it back in taxes either.
Right, we do not. You do not get it back. So.
My accountant just told me that.
I just finished our taxes.
Not really.
So there's a lot of things to think about when you start your career. You know, that it's just much different. It's a different world.
But it is all possible. Like I think one of the way I kind of reconcile all of that, or the guilt. I was talking to our partner, like, do you feel guilty? Like I now send him these articles, and he was like, about what? And I was like, you work all the time. Like you're not necessarily home for dinner. Like you see her a lot on the weekends. It doesn't enter his head. He's like, I have to pay for this, you know, daycare. So I feel like that's my contribution. But the person who helped me like become comfortable with all of this was Michelle Obama. Like reading her book was all inspiring for me when she was like, Barack had his career. I had these two girls. I used to keep them up at night so that they could see daddy. And sometimes daddy wouldn't be home till like after their bedtime. And she was like, look, I'm gonna raise my girls. I'm the head of this household. Like you need to get in where you fit in. And that you're going to have to take some sacrifices as women in order to kind of raise your families. You probably will still primarily be the caregiver, but don't give up on your aspirations. Don't give up on your goals. Don't let that guilt kind of take over your life. Like you can balance and manage all of this. If you can construct a family, you can construct a professional life that's going to be fulfilling for you. And there's a million different ways for women to do that. And so I love her for a variety of reasons, but like reading that resonated with me. Reading like the challenges and stuff that they had to overcome and how realistic she was about that. But really this balance of motherhood and aspiration, because I did start to think like, okay, like if I cancel this one thing, like how many of these things I'm gonna try to cancel when I'm trying to get my name out there to do more stuff. And like now Michelle Obama said it's okay. I literally said that the other day to myself. And so I have to kind of own that. That's my leaning in. Michelle Obama, and like how she kind of understands that, and that I can create all of these spaces. It may look a little bit different for everybody, but don't kind of lessen yourself or your aspirations or the things you want to do. It's going to have to be like thoughtfully negotiated, but that you can do these things. You can have a family system that works for you. So thank you, Michelle.
And I also say,
I was going to ask Maria if you want to leave us with a final.
For me, it's about choices, because I think for a lot of women almost feel guilty if they decide that they want to take time out from work. It's okay. I think it's about the choices you make. What are you comfortable with? If you're going to feel so horribly guilty that it's actually going to affect your work, your parenting, your relationship with your significant other, because you're so stressed because you're working and taking care of a child, if you have the financial means, stay home for a little bit. Work part-time. Just don't be afraid of, at one point people were talking about, working mothers pick on the stay-at-home mothers. I'm like, I don't know what that fight's all about. Right? It just makes no sense to me. It's about people making the choices that are the best for themselves and for their families. I know I have a lot of energy. I used to have a lot of energy. So it was a little easier for me to have the two girls, drive them all over the place, be the soccer coach, be the whatever mom, and still come to work. But I know not everyone has that sort of both emotional and physical energy. So you got to look at yourself and say, what can I do? And say, maybe what I can do now is go part-time. And now we live very long lives. You don't need to retire when you're 40 or 50. So you can pick up. But it's got to be about you, your level of comfort, because that level of comfort is going to affect everyone around you. When mom and dad are happy, everyone is happy. So think about that from that perspective.
So I could talk to you forever, but I know we have to stop here. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom, and please join me in thanking them for our History Month. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Mill and for being a Diversity Matters subscriber. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more, please post, talk about, and reshare our show with all of your friends and family. And leave us a favorable review so that it will make it easier for others to find us wherever they listen to podcasts. We cannot do this important work or keep it going without you, so we really appreciate your support. Beyond the Mill is produced by me, Oscar Holmes IV, and TiAira Neal, and receives generous support from Rutgers University-Camden's Office of Diversity Inclusion and Office of Student Affairs. Diversity Matters is produced by WH Consulting, a firm that provides a wide range of management consulting and professional services to individuals and organizations. Original music produced by Sincere Ward Murray. Until next time, peace and love.